Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review slash knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Kershaw Leek. Actually, it's the Kershaw website exclusive edition in mint chocolate chip Cerakote, and believe it or not, Magnacut. This is, considering this is a USA-made pocket knife, it's pretty inexpensive. I think it comes in at 119 bucks. Obviously, you know, for a pocket knife in general, that is up there a little bit, but not too bad, right, for a USA-made knife. Let me tell you something. I have to admit something before we get started here. The Kershaw Leek is a famous knife. I mean, it has been around since either the late 90s or early 2000s. I mean, it's been around for a while. I'm familiar with this knife. I feel like I've handled it dozens of times over the last 20 years, especially at the Walmart knife counter and various other places. But truth be told, I have never reviewed the Kershaw Leek on this channel. So I'm using this strange mint version that Kershaw sent me actually as a legitimate review sample. I want to actually give you guys my thoughts on the Kershaw Leek. Having really only just experienced it. There's nothing crazy going on here. It's not like, oh my gosh, this blows my mind. I can't believe that I've never carried this thing over the last 20 years. No, but I still want to have a video on the Leek on this channel because it's an iconic knife. Thank you so much to Kershaw for sending this in for me to take a look at. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex and on TikTok at _metal_complex. So, this version, the only thing that's different is that it's in Magnacut and the mint. And that's great, right? If you like those materials, you like USA-made knives, and you like mint chocolate chip ice cream print, like aesthetic, then yeah, the Kershaw made a knife for you. And honestly, I think the price is pretty good. The standard version of the Leek comes in steel. This is still steel, by the way, on the frame. And 14T28N. And now these knives seem to be on sale like almost all the time. So you'll see varying, like widely varying price ranges. I think the lowest I saw was about 60 bucks. And then some of the other versions that seem to be almost exactly the same are like $90, right? All within that zone, depending on which variant you get. I don't think that there's a huge problem with that range considering it's a USA made knife. Still going to give you guys my thoughts on it. I will link the Kershaw Leek in general in the description. Overall length of this guy, for those unfamiliar, comes in at 7 inches. Blade length is 3 inches. Cutting edge is 2.85. Nice size. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons. Any custom scales you find in this section, you can find down in the description under Original Goat and Other. So up against the 80-10 and the 80-20.5. It's a sleek, slender boy, definitely shorter and thinner all the way around than these two versus the PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. Once again, on the shorter side, but it does have similar, actually longer. It's got more cutting edge than the Spyderco Para 3 and a similar amount of handle minus the choke up position. How about up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca? Slender, kind of in the same way, but I mean, it still doesn't have a blade that's quite as tall or a handle that's quite as tall. How's the action? This is one of those assisted knives. Oh, we all shiver together, right? I mean, I know that a lot of you guys are pointing out and tip down carry. I know, one thing at a time here. You know, this model was incredibly popular during a time where assisted knives were, I don't want to say all the rage. They just weren't as, you know, we didn't have our noses as far up in the air back then. You know, there's nothing wrong with an assisted knife. In fact, for a lot of people who have arthritis, or they just, you know, they just find that manipulating a knife, the way, like it, I feel like I kind of take for granted how natural the manipulation of a pocket knife is for me. And I realize, you know, when I hand these knives off to people who are not as familiar with some of these systems as I am, they just don't have the same muscle memory. Not that it can't be developed, right? But for a lot of people, an assisted knife just makes sense. It's just easier for them. You just barely push down on the the flipper tab and it deploys. Not the same thing as a switchblade if you're new, right? But knife people, right? Seasoned knife veterans such as myself, we put our noses way, way into the sky, way into the mesosphere, because we don't need the assistance of some sort of spring, unless it's, of course, an automatic knife. Then we have no problem with it. But we don't, a lot of people don't like the idea of a torsion bar on these knives because I guess it's an extra part that can fail. And a lot of people say, well, a good detent will give you the exact same action. It's no faster. It's easy. A lot of people say it's even easier to manipulate because there's no tension on the way back down. Personally, I agree. I don't need the assisted feature. But I don't think it's a big deal that it's there for some people. I think for some people that's either their preference or they just don't care. It works really well. You push down on the flipper tab and it deploys. This is a steel frame lock. There's access to it, but it's got a ledge, right? It's just like a hard 90-degree angle, but you can get in there. And the lock bar tension is not insane. There's no over travel. I mean, the pocket clip, I guess, is kind of pushing back on the lock bar, but I wouldn't worry too much about overextending it. It's easy to push back out of the way, and that tension bar that's like launching the blade is not creating so much excess pressure that it's hard to put away with one hand, right? So not bad. I mean, it does essentially exactly what you would expect it to do. Anyways, let's go ahead and move on here. I mean, I feel like the action is essentially what people would think. You can, by the way, I almost forgot that there were thumb studs. I never use the thumb studs. Those are so weird and tiny. But you know what? Because it is assisted, before you can even try to figure out where you want to be to get the proper leverage, it just doesn't take much. I mean, the blade it deploys, right? If you are not bothered by assisted opening knives, or even if you are bothered by assisted opening knives, it's just a really easy thing to deploy. I mean, I have to be fair. It's just really, really simple to operate. Let's go ahead and do it. And by the way, can it be de-assisted? Is there a detent ball? I don't believe so. Let me look here real quick. I didn't actually think of that until just now, but I would like to take a glance in there if I can. You'd think that I would have flashlights everywhere, right? Now here we go. We've got one right here. Let's get it to be able to look. Yeah, I don't believe there's anything in the way of a detent ball. I'll let you guys look in there. Yeah, I don't think that this can be de-assisted. So it's either assisted or nothing, unless there's a version of this that I'm not aware of. Carry profile, thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. This is a thin knife, and that's good because the steel makes it feel kind of oddly heavy for such a small object. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. This is where the thing shines. I mean, when I remember picking this up and I was like, man, it's obvious this is steel. I'm so used to smaller knives in aluminum or titanium, and they just feel so much lighter. Like this Benchmade bug out feels way lighter, right? But because of the profile and the thinness, I realized immediately putting it in my pocket, I was like, it makes no difference. The carry profile is so slim that it doesn't matter. And the weight, I realized I appreciated because I realized it was still there at the end of the day. I didn't throw my pants and my knife into the washing machine. So I feel like there's a synergy, there's a balance there. But this is a very simple knife to carry. Materials, like I said, on this guy, steel and Magnacut. Standard is steel and 14C28N, which is great, actually. That's really good. I mean, a lot of people are going to come down on this thing. I just have never taken the time to really pay attention to the leak, which is crazy. I have 4,000 uploads on it. It's crazy. I've never taken the time to pay attention. But 14C28N, and okay, it's a steel frame, right? And it's US made, and it's assisted. There's stuff to kind of make fun of and complain about, sure. But the price really doesn't bother. I was like, what? This is Kershaw being Kershaw, like doing a good job, essentially, right? For the people who are not bothered by these elements that the rest of us turn our noses up to, right? But anyways, let's go ahead and measure the blade stock thickness. This is definitely a blade that's on the thinner side. I would venture to guess it's like 80 thousandths or something like that, 80 or 90 thousandths. Let's see. Yeah, I knew 85 thousandths. It's a thin guy. We'll weigh it and then get on into the meat and potatoes, which there's not a lot of meat. There's not a lot of potatoes either. It's essentially just vegetables. It's that funny? I don't know. I realize it's unintentional food humor because it's an ice cream themed knife. It weighs 3.10 ounces, or 3.1 ounces, which is fine. It's close to ultra lightweight. Anyway, the knife is going to be a little butt heavy because of the steel, but that's not really a big deal. Let's, what we didn't do is the hardware check. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'm going to get out my tools. As per usual, my tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. I bet you we've got, do we have a T8? Surely, yeah, T8. And then I honestly didn't move the pocket clip. I thought I might as well get the authentic Kershaw Leek experience. It's a steel frame lock. It's speed save assisted, right? I might as well go ahead and carry it tip down, which is not what I would recommend. Fortunately, I did not have any accidental deployments. The reason I'm saying this is because you actually have to take the pocket clip off to see. I was going to say if there's an adjustment head on the other side, which I'm curious about now. I feel like it's probably flat, but maybe it's got two heads. We'll just go ahead and remove the clip. These are T6 screws, by the way, which are also the screws on the frame. There are 3 of them, but they go all the way through the frame, and they're threaded into the steel on the other side, which is fine because it's a steel frame. And even if it was a titanium frame, no big deal. I've never actually seen screws or threads on the frame strip. But that's the worry that is brought up sometimes on forums, is that if the threads on the frame strip, then what am I doing? I'm removing a frame screw. But these are all T6. But what I was going to say was it's still minimal hardware because there's only 3 of them. But anyways, the worry is that the threads are going to strip, and then you really have a problem because you'd have to replace the whole scale. And I've never heard of that actually happening. So I don't really care that it's got 3. I think 3 is too much for one side if you're going to have 3 on the other side. But in this case, it's literally just 3 on one side. Okay, it's a captive pivot. So that's nice, right? So really, if you wanted to take this thing apart, you can see in there phosphor bronze washers, right? If you wanted to take this thing apart, it really wouldn't be that big of a deal. You will have to work around that torsion bar. So that's a little bit of an extra thing, but not that big of a deal. It's like I always say, as long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. This will end up as a giveaway knife, and I want to keep it in the exact configuration that it was in when Kershaw sent it. So I'm going to go ahead and put the pocket clip back set for tip down carry, which, by the way, if you're new, is also something that seasoned knife enthusiasts such as myself, it's something that we turn our noses in the air to. Anyways, the knife's going to be easy to take apart. All right, let's go ahead and move into the meat and potatoes here. What the heck is this little switch down here? I laughed, I think when I unboxed it, because I forgot that it has a safety in the closed position, which is, I guess, handy for 2 different groups of people. Number one, if you leave this in an area where you don't want a kid to get a hold of it and deploy it, okay, I think that's the most reasonable use of it, right? Also, if you are sprinting with a pocket knife and you don't want it to accidentally deploy, which honestly, on an assisted knife, I suppose you might have more of a chance there than other styles of manual knife. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe it's actually easier for a manual knife to deploy, right? No idea. Also, if you are going to carry it tip down, which on a flipper is not recommendable, right? If you're right-handed and it's tipped down and it's up against the back of your pocket seam, which is the appropriate place to carry a knife, a psychopath carries the knife up against the front of the pocket seam. That's, for obvious reasons, is not where you should be carrying your pocket knife. But if you bump into something and it bumps hard enough into that flipper tab, guess what? Right? Well, if the safety's on, nothing. But it will deploy. I think I may have... Did I tighten that pivot back down a little bit too hard? Did I tighten the pocket clip too hard? Did I tighten the frame screw too hard? I didn't even mess with it. This is so weird. Did the frame screw I'll get back to that point I was making. This is a weird review, but I don't want to cut it. I want to leave this all in exactly the way that it is. Tightening the frame screw messed with the deployment? No, that can't be. Tightening the pocket clip screws, I bet. I wonder if I tighten those all the way. Can you tighten these all the way into the washers? What on earth? Maybe I did tighten that that pivot screw just a little bit. That is bizarre. I mean, the action was just fine, and now all of a sudden it is different. Where is the T8? There it is. Wow, how weird. I can't say that I've ever had that happen. Okay. Well, it's working fine now, and it's completely solid. Well, that was the weirdest thing I've ever experienced. Let's go ahead and get these bits out of the way and proceed with the review. But anyways, if you are carrying it tipped down and you're aware that, I might bump into something, right? I don't want that flipper tab to get bumped and have the knife deploy in my pocket, which people will be quick to point out is incredibly unlikely, and I'm aware of that, right? Incredibly unlikely. But in the event that you are aware that that could occur and you want to keep yourself safe from that, you can simply slide that lever over and it's not going to happen. Realistically, I think this is a pretty useless feature. I mean, as soon as you get out of your pocket and you go to deploy it, multiple times this happened. Well, I only carried this for a couple of days. But multiple times I'd pick it up to deploy it and I'd be like, oh, I left that thing on. The last time I was sitting there on the couch and I was fidgeting with this back and forth, and I left it in the closed position, I guess, over the blade. So I don't know why that's there. Maybe you guys can tell me, is this the only Kershaw knife that has that? I doubt it. I feel like there's probably other ones. But if there's another purpose for this, I don't know what it is. That just seems a little bizarre to me. But I guess I could understand, if you have kids or if you're around somebody you just don't want to be able to immediately deploy your knife, you can turn that on. Otherwise, I don't think I would ever have it on. Anyways, ergonomically, you know what? It's pretty good. That pocket clip is way too long. This was something that I feel like knife designers, and this is a Ken Onion design, but knife designers, manufacturers, they just didn't care. Like, clip depth and length was just like, whatever, right? It's supposed to attach to your person, so who cares? Even if this was in my preferred configuration, which would be like this tip up carry, right? The clip is, it's so long, and it has this really weird bill. So in either position, it's not going to be super comfortable. Outside of that, though, it's a thin, flat steel frame lock. So I guess it's fine. Like, the grip is fine. It's not like, oh my gosh, my hand's going to fall off, I'm in so much pain. But it's not what I would describe as comfortable. It's reasonably ergonomic. Like, I can use my hand to hang on to it, and it's not the worst pain in the whole world. I guess you could call this a choke-up spot. The only thing that's weird about this knife is it's so thin, right? I think that's really what's bothering me so much. It's not uncomfortable. It's just very thin. So it's fine. And during use, it felt pretty natural, honestly, just to grab here, rest my thumb, or hold here, hold here, draw cuts, right? Honestly, my favorite part about the knife is the blade shape. It's got a tip, right? But it's not a drop point. I feel like it's closer to a Wharncliffe, kind of. I don't know. The nose is dropped, so the edge is not straight like a Wharncliffe. It just has subtle curvature, but it does do pretty well with draw cuts. Honestly, the manufacturing quality of this knife right now is very, very good. Back in the day, many of you probably have older Leeks that have fit and finish issues. The only weird thing about this knife was literally just now what you saw happen there. One of the screws that I messed with, it made it to where it didn't want to deploy. So I had to actually loosen the pivot screw slightly. Maybe I did. If I go back and watch the video, maybe I actually tightened the pivot screw. So I don't know if I want to call that a fit and finish issue, but these are manufactured very well. This is clearly a new USA Kershaw item. Not too many years ago, Kershaw's China and USA lines were riddled with fit and finish stuff. Wonky grind lines, poor symmetry in places where you're supposed to have symmetry, poor seating of the hardware, lockup issues, all of that. This knife doesn't seem to have any. I mean, it really, it locks up well. It fires just fine. I think the blade is even centered. Yeah, even after messing with that, maybe it's slightly off. Can I maybe it's slightly off, but I don't know that I really want to judge it for that. Honestly, this is made very, very well. Any of the Cerakote models, it's a decent coating, but it will wear off with use, right? Personally, the mint chocolate thing is not my cup of tea, but I know that there's a bunch of people out there who really like this sort of food and knife themed stuff. So there you go. Kershaw makes one of those. The blade is super duper thin and is an excellent cutter. I'd be lying if I wasn't going to admit that. It really is just a great EDC blade. I can understand how this knife got so famous, right? It's not, my preferences are completely outside of, like, there's nothing about this knife that tickles my fancy, I guess, to put that in the cringiest way possible. But I can understand why this knife works for so many people. It's just a good, straightforward tool, right? Nothing's in the cutting path, almost. Just maybe a little bit, but not really. Good amount of cutting edge, very thin, right? Just very good for, like, simple knife tasks. And it's got an easy deployment mechanism, and it's easy to close with one hand. It's just a very familiar object, even if you've never handled it before. It just makes sense. A little backspacer in the middle of the knife, probably just to keep you from touching the blade, maybe. I don't know. It looks like it's plenty under there. It's just odd. Usually it goes down to the end. There's a lanyard hole. Great. Bunch of holes all over the place. This is so you can mount it for tip up carry if you want to, but no holes for lefties. Do they make a lefty leak? I honestly don't know. There is no blade play. Up, down, left to right. There's no lock stick. The geometry looks pretty good. Honestly, it looks like very early lockup. Good enough for me. No blade play, up, down, left to right. No lock stick. No pivot lash. And I mean, the action is as smooth as you could, ask for on a knife like this. And like I said, I think the blade is slightly off center, but that could be because I adjusted it just now. I get why this is a popular knife. Totally get it. It's not my cup of tea personally, but for people looking for a good USA option, it's crazy that this is actually still a very recommendable knife. I mean, it's a steel frame lock, but the weight makes sense and it's still incredibly lightweight. The fact that you can get a Magnacut version of this for $119 is kind of awesome, right? But if you can find one of these on sale, which like I said, they seem to be on sale all the time. I'm always seeing sales for Kershaw Leek. So I'm going to go ahead and say, if you can find this thing for like $65, oh yeah, this is a great knife. This is the knife that you gift to like your dad, like when he finally breaks his knife, or your grandpa or your uncle or whoever just has had the same pocket knife for years and years and years. And it always seems to be right around the size. They break it or they lose it or whatever. This is the knife that you gift them, because this will be the knife that they carry for 20 more years or 10 more years or whatever, right? This is the knife that you give to a non-knife person. In fact, this is the knife that starts the knife journey for so many people. I know for a fact that many of you started your knife journey with the Kershaw Leek. So this is that knife. It's not going to be for the typical seasoned knife enthusiast, right? The snob like me. It's not going to be for them. But there's no reason we can't appreciate this knife for what it is. I mean, it has a legend, it has a legacy, and I think for good reason. It's awesome that it's still a great deal in 2024. I don't think that now the ones that get up there 90, $100 for 14C28N, no. I mean, that's great that it's USA made, right? But I think the fact that you can, because there's a lot of Chinese knives that are G10 and steel and 14C28N, and they're great, and we celebrate them, and they're like $65. Well, here Kershaw is making this in the United States, or mostly, and there's still some of them are getting down to $65. So yeah, credit where it's due. I'm not into assisted knives. Or steel frame locks usually are a bit wonky. The pocket clip is definitely weird. And it's a little bit awkward to hang on to because it's so thin, but it's still a good knife, right? So this is going to go in my cheap knives I like playlist because the base version of this knife is absolutely a budget knife, even though this particular version isn't. So yeah, you can check that playlist out if you want to. But generally speaking, I do recommend the Leek. So it's also going to go in my recommended knives playlist. It's going to go in both. Thank you so much to Kershaw for sending this in. This will end up being a giveaway item on one of my future live streams, which are usually Friday evenings at 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Check links in the description for this guy. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex and on TikTok at _metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.